The morning in Green Hill, Connecticut was quiet. Eleanor Fisher was taking one last look at the view from the window she had known since childhood, the old maple tree in the backyard and the rolling hills beyond. Her heart was filled with anxiety. But this time, she was certain she would never return. "Are you really leaving? Isn't there any room to reconsider?" Her mother Martha's voice came from downstairs, showing more irritation than concern. Eleanor took a deep breath and packed the last of her belongings into her suitcase. She didn't think she needed to answer. Last night, and the night before, they had repeated the same conversation. Eleanor had always been serious and hardworking. She had earned excellent grades at the local high school and studied business management at the state university. Her father Jonathan had always been proud of her. "You'll be able to make this company even bigger," that was his favorite phrase. Fisher Antiques was a small but well-respected furniture restoration shop, and her father's meticulous craftsmanship and honesty were highly valued by the local people. But at home, Eleanor had always been in the shadows. Her younger sister Caroline had been the family's sunshine from the moment she was born. With her golden curls and big blue eyes, Caroline attracted attention wherever she went. Martha was proud of her daughter's beauty and often said, "She looks just like me." Caroline showed little interest in academics, but her outgoing personality surrounded her with many friends. When she was chosen as homecoming queen, Martha spent a month spreading the news throughout the neighborhood. Meanwhile, when Eleanor won the state mathematics competition, her mother merely said, "That's nice." When Eleanor was 25, her father died suddenly of a heart attack. On the day of the funeral, Martha and Caroline were surrounded by grieving people. Eleanor sat alone in her father's workshop, touching his tools. After his death, it was natural for her to take over the shop. Though never spoken aloud, it had been an unspoken understanding between her father and herself. "Please come to your senses." Martha came up the stairs and leaned against Eleanor's bedroom door. "Dad's company belongs to our family. It's not something you can decide on your own." Eleanor closed her suitcase and looked her mother in the eye. "Dad wanted me to take over. You know that." "He never said that." Martha folded her arms. "Besides, you don't have any talent for business. Caroline is much better with people." The reality was different. After her father's death, Eleanor had worked day and night. She maintained relationships with old customers, developed new ones, and built a small but stable business. And a month ago, she had made plans for expansion and was preparing to take out a loan from the bank. But everything fell apart a week ago. The papers that Martha and Caroline showed her, she thought were just orders for new equipment. Being too busy, Eleanor signed them without thoroughly checking the contents. She never imagined they were documents transferring the company's ownership to Martha and Caroline. When she learned the truth, Eleanor couldn't believe her ears. "Why would you do such a thing?" "Caroline needs an opportunity," Martha answered coldly. "You're always thinking only about yourself. Hogging all of Dad's affection." The truth was just the opposite. Eleanor had always devoted herself to her family. During college, she had paid her own tuition through scholarships and part-time jobs, and after her father's death, she had supported the household. Yet in the eyes of her mother and sister, she was always an unwelcome presence. "I'm leaving," Eleanor finally decided. "But this isn't over." "What are you going to say?" Martha laughed. "You don't have any evidence. The lawyer said so too." That was true. The lawyer Eleanor consulted said the signature was genuine, and it would be difficult to prove fraud. It would be a waste of time and money, was his conclusion. Eleanor picked up her suitcase and went downstairs. In the living room, Caroline was lying on the sofa reading a magazine. She didn't even stand up when she saw her sister. "You're really leaving?" "So dramatic," Caroline said without looking up from her magazine. "This is what you wanted," Eleanor replied quietly. "I guess," Caroline said, turning a page. "But where will you go? You don't have any money." Eleanor didn't answer. It was true her savings weren't much. Most of the profits from her father's company had gone to maintaining the house and her mother's medical expenses. But she had a plan. Her college friend Jennifer had agreed to rent her a room in her small New York apartment. It was a temporary measure, but it would be a new starting point. "Don't take anything that belongs to me," Martha said. "Everything in this house is mine." Eleanor headed for the front door. Looking back, she saw Martha and Caroline watching her. Their eyes gleamed with victory. "Goodbye," Eleanor said. "Good luck," Caroline said mockingly. "You're going to need it." The moment the door closed, tears fell from Eleanor's eyes. She got into her car and started the engine. The family home reflected in the rearview mirror already seemed like a thing of the past. Eleanor took a deep breath and gripped the steering wheel. A determination was growing in her heart. This wasn't an end, but a new beginning. She had inherited more than just the company from her father. She had also inherited his perseverance and integrity. Someday, she would surely recover. The car drove away quietly, leaving behind the small town of Greenhill. The Grand Harbor Hotel. The moment Eleanor stepped into the luxurious lobby of the Grand Harbor Hotel, she felt the 10 years of time rushing back to her all at once. The glossy marble floor, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, and the scent of flowers wafting through the space were worlds apart from the life she had built until today. Eleanor took a deep breath and straightened her posture. The navy silk dress fit perfectly on her slender body, giving a modest yet elegant impression. Her hair was cut at shoulder length, styled simply but sophisticatedly. On her arm was a small clutch bag containing a carefully folded invitation. "Your name, please?" A young woman standing at the reception table asked Eleanor, with a list in front of her. "Eleanor Fisher." The woman scanned the list and frowned. "I'm sorry. It seems your name isn't on the list." Eleanor maintained her smile and took out the invitation. "I have an invitation here." The invitation bore the signature of Walter Curtis himself, CEO of Walter Curtis & Son Company. The woman looked momentarily confused but quickly regained her smile. "I sincerely apologize. Please go right in. The ceremony has already begun." Eleanor nodded slightly and walked down the hallway leading to the banquet hall. For 10 years, she had imagined this day. Since leaving Greenhill, she had never returned to her hometown. After spending a few months in her friend Jennifer's apartment, she had found a job in furniture design and gradually built her career. The first few years were tough. She worked late into the night, lived in a cheap apartment, and saved every penny. But her talent and integrity gradually gained recognition, and 5 years ago, she had established her own small design studio. Then 2 years ago, she reached a major turning point. A large furniture manufacturing company called Walter Curtis & Son Company showed interest in her designs and offered a partnership. Eleanor paused at the entrance to the hall. The ceremony had already ended, and the reception had begun. Hundreds of guests were seated at round tables, enjoying conversation. On the wall hung a giant photograph of Caroline and her fiancé, Jason Curtis. Caroline was still beautiful, and Jason looked handsome and dependable. Eleanor slowly walked through the hall, looking for her seat. Small name cards were placed on the tables, but nowhere could she find Eleanor Fisher. "Are you looking for someone?" A waiter nearby addressed her. "I'm looking for my seat," Eleanor replied. "Your name?" "Eleanor Fisher." The waiter thought for a moment, then said, "Just a moment, please," and walked away. Eleanor surveyed the room. Martha, as the mother of the bride, was seated at the main table. Still beautiful despite the years, her smile was unchanged from 10 years ago. Caroline sat next to her groom, Jason, receiving congratulations from guests with a smile. Her wedding dress was probably by a top designer, the pure white satin accentuating her blonde hair and blue eyes. Suddenly, Caroline's gaze turned toward Eleanor. Her smile froze for an instant, then quickly returned. Caroline whispered something to Jason, then stood up. Eleanor's heart began to race. She could see Caroline walking toward her. A reunion after 10 years. Eleanor straightened her back and tried to smile. Eleanor? Caroline's voice was cold. What are you doing? This is my wedding. It's been a long time, Caroline, Eleanor replied calmly. You look beautiful. Congratulations. Caroline ignored her sister's words and said, Who invited you? This is embarrassing. Her eyes gleamed with anger. I was properly invited, Eleanor answered, taking out the invitation from her clutch bag again. At that moment, Martha approached. Her face changed color when she saw Eleanor. Eleanor? Why did you come? Hello, Mother, Eleanor said. It's been a while. This isn't the place for you, Martha's voice was low, trembling with anger. Leave immediately. Eleanor smiled slowly. No. I was invited by someone. By whom? Caroline asked sharply. At that moment, two men could be seen approaching from across the hall. One was a dignified man in his early 60s, and the other was younger, the groom, Jason, who had been sitting next to Caroline. When Martha and Caroline turned around, the men were already close. The expressions of the two women froze. Eleanor? You came. Walter Curtis said with a warm smile. Welcome. Thank you, Walter, Eleanor answered. Dad, you know her? Jason asked. Of course, Walter said proudly. Eleanor is one of our company's most important design partners. Her designs are the best sellers in our new line. The blood drained from Caroline's face. But, she is Caroline's sister, right? Walter smiled. She told me about it. Family bonds must be cherished. Martha and Caroline stood speechless. Eleanor, it seems your seat couldn't be found, Walter said. Jason, would you please have a seat prepared immediately? Yes, Father, Jason replied, looking a bit confused, and promptly went to call a waiter. This way, please, miss, the waiter returned and guided Eleanor. Surprisingly, the prepared seat was near the main table, next to Walter. Eleanor took her new seat and picked up a glass of water. Martha and Caroline stared at her, their eyes showing a mix of anger and confusion. But they couldn't say anything in front of Walter. Eleanor raised her glass slightly and smiled at them. The wedding reception. Champagne glasses reflected the light, and the elegant melody of violins flowed through the venue. Eleanor quietly enjoyed her meal, occasionally conversing with Walter. From the surrounding tables, she could feel curious glances directed at her. Rumors were buzzing around the hall like the sound of bees' wings. Caroline was trying to ignore Eleanor, but her occasional glances revealed her anger. Martha was similarly desperate to keep up appearances. Eleanor, how are your recent works? Walter asked amiably. His voice contained genuine interest. Thank you, they're going well, Eleanor smiled. The Urban Comfort collection is receiving better feedback than expected. It's especially popular with young couples. I'm sure, Walter nodded with satisfaction. Your sensibility is a step ahead of the times. For our company, partnering with you was the best decision. Hearing these words, Caroline's expression darkened further. She whispered something to her groom, Jason, who looked toward Eleanor and then shrugged in confusion. After the meal, Walter took Eleanor around the venue, introducing her to important clients and friends. This is Eleanor Fisher, the designer everyone's talking about. Thanks to her, our company's market share among young demographics increased by 40% compared to last year. People showed respect to Eleanor, and some exchanged business cards. Her quiet confidence and intelligence shone even in this glamorous social setting. Meanwhile, Caroline was increasingly uneasy. More than the joy of being celebrated as a bride, her sister's presence was disturbing her peace of mind. I hadn't heard about your sister, Sylvia Curtis, the groom's mother, approached Caroline. She's incredibly talented. Walter speaks very highly of her. I don't want to talk about her, Caroline answered through gritted teeth. She abandoned her family. Sylvia looked surprised but didn't pursue the matter further. As the reception reached its peak, it was time for speeches. After the groom Jason, Martha, and several friends had given their congratulations, Walter stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for gathering on this blessed day, Walter began in a strong voice. I am truly delighted to celebrate the union of my son Jason and the beautiful bride Caroline. Applause erupted from the audience. But today, I'd like to introduce another special guest. Walter looked at Eleanor. Eleanor Fisher, Caroline's sister. Applause arose again, but this time mixed with confused expressions. Martha and Caroline's faces tensed, desperately trying to maintain their smiles. Many of you may not know, but Eleanor is one of our company's most important business partners, Walter continued. The Fisher Modern line she designed accounted for 20% of our company's sales last year. A murmur went through the hall. Eleanor sat quietly, listening to Walter's words. Her talent, integrity, and perseverance are rare in the business world. 10 years ago, she entered this industry with almost nothing, and now she is one of the industry's leading designers. Walter raised his glass. To Eleanor, a toast to your success. And may our partnership with our company continue. Cheers. The people in the hall raised their glasses. Eleanor stood up and briefly responded, Thank you, Walter. And thank you all. Her voice was controlled but powerful. After the speech, Eleanor excused herself temporarily and went out to the terrace. The evening air cooled her heated cheeks. She had known this day would come eventually. But even though she thought she was mentally prepared, the wave of emotions was more than expected. Eleanor. Turning around, she saw Caroline standing there. Her beautiful face was distorted with anger. Are you trying to ruin my wedding? She said in a low voice. Taking revenge like this is cowardly. Eleanor took a deep breath. This isn't revenge, Caroline. I just accepted Walter's invitation. More lies. Caroline's voice grew a bit louder. You always pretend to be the victim. It was the same with Dad. What are you talking about? Eleanor's brows furrowed. Dad always. Caroline's words were interrupted by a shadow appearing on the terrace. Is something wrong? It was Walter's voice. Behind him stood Jason and Martha. No, nothing, Caroline instantly regained her smile. Just having a little chat with my sister about old times. Walter looked at both of them, apparently sensing the tension. Caroline, Martha, it's a wonderful day for both of you. But there's one thing I've been wondering about. What is it? Martha replied, looking tense. Why wasn't Eleanor's name on the invitation list? Walter's voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Why exclude the most successful member of the family? That's... Martha was at a loss for words. And what happened to Fisher Antiques? Walter continued. It was Eleanor's father's company before she became successful as a designer, wasn't it? Silence spread through the room. Eleanor stood quietly, watching how things would unfold. There seems to be something I should know, Walter said quietly. Jason, I'd like to have a family talk now. Could you give us some time? Jason looked at his father with a confused expression but nodded and left. Eleanor, Caroline, Martha, Walter looked at the three women. I've reserved a small conference room at the hotel. Let's talk there. Martha and Caroline tried to protest, but they fell silent in the face of Walter's resolute attitude. Eleanor nodded slowly. After 10 years, the time had finally come for the truth to be revealed. The truth revealed. The small conference room at the Grand Harbor Hotel was filled with a solemn atmosphere. Walter sat at the head of the table, with Eleanor, Caroline, and Martha seated on either side. Outside the windows, the night had deepened, and the room was illuminated only by the soft light of table lamps. "Now," Walter quietly began, "I arranged this meeting because I felt something important was not being spoken. I have the right to know about the family of my son's bride." Caroline anxiously looked at her mother. Martha pressed her lips together, her hands tightly clasped. "Eleanor," Walter turned to her, "could you tell us your story? Why did you leave your family?" Eleanor took a slow, deep breath. For 10 years, she had never told her story to anyone. When asked by friends or colleagues, she had always given vague answers. But now, it was time to tell the truth. 10 years ago, after my father passed away, I took over his furniture restoration shop, Fisher Antiques, Eleanor began quietly. During his lifetime, he had expressed this intention to me. I studied management and gradually expanded the shop. Martha tried to speak, but Walter raised his hand to stop her. One day, I made plans for a business expansion and was preparing to take out a loan from the bank, Eleanor continued. Around that time, my mother and Caroline showed me some papers. They said they were orders for new equipment. Eleanor's voice trembled slightly, but she continued. Due to being busy, I signed without carefully checking the contents. Later, I discovered they were documents transferring ownership of the company to my mother and Caroline. Walter's expression hardened. "That's fraud." "No." Caroline raised her voice. "Eleanor always thinks she's the victim. She couldn't manage the company. We were just rescuing it." "That's right," Martha joined in. "Jonathan would have wanted to leave the company to the whole family. Eleanor shouldn't have been given special treatment." Eleanor smiled quietly. "My father's will clearly stated that the company should be passed to me. We lost that will." Martha retorted. "No, you didn't." Eleanor took out a worn envelope from her clutch bag. "This is a copy. The original is kept by my lawyer." The blood drained from Martha and Caroline's faces. "I consulted a lawyer about the unfairness of the papers I signed," Eleanor continued. "He said we could fight, but a legal battle with family would be a waste of time and money. At that time, I didn't have the resources for that." Eleanor slowly took out another document from the envelope. "This is a copy of the transfer document I was made to sign. Next to my signature is the date. And 3 days later." She showed another document. "My mother and Caroline sold the company to Hampton Interiors." "Sold?" Walter's eyebrows rose. "After inheriting your father's legacy, you immediately sold it?" "We had that right," Martha said weakly. "We had become the legal owners. But morally?" Walter's voice was cold. "My father's company was part of my life," Eleanor said quietly. "When it was taken from me, I left Greenhill with nothing. I went to New York and started a new life with the help of a friend." Caroline suddenly began to cry. "It wasn't fair that you were given special treatment. Dad always thought about you. I was always second best." "Caroline." Eleanor looked at her sister. "Dad loved you too. We were just loved in different ways." "Liar." Caroline shouted. "After you left, we lived a wonderful life with the money from selling the company. That was the life I was supposed to have." A quiet silence filled the room. Walter was looking through Eleanor's documents. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "I respect that you've recovered from such adversity and achieved success. When I learned of your talent and integrity, I was drawn to you. But when I found out you were actually Caroline's sister, I thought it might be an opportunity to repair your relationship. So that's why you invited me to the wedding." Eleanor smiled. "Yes. But what I didn't know was the cause of this deep rift." Walter looked sternly at Martha and Caroline. "Fraud and family betrayal." "Walter," Martha desperately tried to smooth things over, "this is just a family misunderstanding. Let's put the past behind us." "This isn't about the past," Walter said quietly but firmly. "This is about character and integrity." He slowly stood up. Actually, I first became interested in Eleanor because her design company, Fisher Modern, was growing rapidly and beginning to threaten our company's market share. The innovation and quality of her designs were becoming renowned in the industry. Fisher Modern. Caroline's eyes widened. No way. Yes, that's my company, Eleanor quietly answered. I combined the techniques I learned from my father with my own new vision. I started from a small workshop, but now I employ 50 staff members. And now it's one of Curtis Furniture's most important partners, Walter added. The growth in our company's market for young demographics is almost entirely due to Eleanor's designs. Martha was dumbfounded. But I thought Eleanor was just a designer, working for a small company. Mother, I'm not just a designer, Eleanor said quietly. I'm the CEO. The founder and owner of Fisher Modern. Caroline's expression changed. Now fear dominated her face. Then, you are? Yes, I am financially successful, Eleanor confirmed. And last year, I also acquired Hampton Interiors. What? Martha gasped. Ironically, that's the company you and Caroline sold my father's company to, Eleanor's voice was calm. When they fell into financial difficulties, I made an offer to buy them. They didn't know my identity. A heavy silence flowed through the room. Walter looked at Eleanor with deep respect. Caroline, Walter finally said, I am deeply disappointed in the actions you and Martha have taken. You are about to marry my son. But honesty and integrity are the values our family most cherishes. Please, Walter, Martha said in a trembling voice, this is in the past. Caroline has changed. Walter quietly shook his head. Character doesn't change easily. He stood up and said to Eleanor, Eleanor, could I have some time to talk with you? I have a personal matter to discuss. Eleanor nodded and stood up. Caroline broke down in tears, and Martha was in a daze. Before leaving the room, Eleanor turned back. Mother, Caroline, I don't hate you. But it will take time to regain trust. She and Walter quietly left the room. In the hallway, Jason was waiting with an anxious expression. Dad, what? We'll talk later, Walter said with a serious expression. A new beginning. The soft spring sunlight reflected and shone on the windows of Manhattan's skyscrapers. Eleanor gazed out of her office's large window, taking in the green of Central Park visible in the distance. 3 months had passed since the wedding, and the seasons had changed from winter to spring. Her life, too, was entering a new season. Eleanor, the new contract from Curtis Company has arrived, her secretary Linda handed over the documents. Eleanor smiled and replied, thank you. Her partnership with Walter was progressing smoothly. Even after Caroline and Jason's engagement was called off, her professional relationship with Walter continued. Walter had decided he couldn't let his son marry into a family of fraudsters. Eleanor's cell phone rang. The screen displayed Jennifer's name, her close friend who had helped her when she came to New York with nothing 10 years ago. Jenny, what's up? Eleanor, you won't believe it. Jennifer's excited voice resonated. Your mother and sister came to my cafe. Eleanor was momentarily speechless. What? They say they want to see you, Jennifer's voice calmed a bit. They looked quite different. Especially Caroline. I've never seen such a haggard expression on her. Eleanor took a deep breath and answered, all right. I'll be right there. 30 minutes later, Eleanor arrived at Jennifer's cafe. Looking through the window, she saw 2 women sitting at a small table. Martha had visibly aged, and Caroline's radiant beauty had faded. When she entered the cafe, the 2 noticed her and watched her with tense expressions. Eleanor? Martha tried to stand up but stumbled. Stay seated, Eleanor said quietly and sat down across from them. After a silence, Caroline spoke. We've lost everything, her voice trembled. The company, the sale money, everything. We failed in our investments, Martha explained with tired eyes. After you left, we started living luxuriously. But the money decreased faster than we imagined. Eleanor said nothing, just listening to them. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Caroline said with tears streaming down her face. But I wanted to apologize to you. I'm truly sorry. Eleanor nodded slowly. Thank you. I'm glad to hear that. Will you come back? Martha asked hopefully. Eleanor smiled gently. Mother, I have my own life now. But I can help you. I'll arrange a small apartment and jobs for you. Martha and Caroline showed surprised expressions. But there are conditions, Eleanor continued. Both of you need to receive psychological counseling. And you have to start from the bottom at my company. A year later, Eleanor finally officially bought back her father's company, Fisher Antiques. That day, she visited Greenhill and placed flowers on her father's grave. The same weekend, she was invited to Jason's wedding with his new fiancée. This time, there was a formal invitation and a properly prepared seat. Life sometimes takes unexpected turns, but Eleanor never lost sight of her path. She had proven her worth with the integrity and perseverance she inherited from her father.